Unit 1 Exam Review, question number 16. Consider the conditional statement. If x is a prime number, then x is an odd number. Is this statement true for x equals 2? Remember, a prime number is divisible only by 1 and itself. Choose the answer with the most correct explanation. Over here on the right, we have a conditional statement is a proposition with an if and then in structure. We have if and then. And these can be classified as true or false by studying the assumption and conclusion. The assumption, in fact, let's go down again as we did previously with the pills. So if you need help and also to remember the different ways of identifying if the statement is true or false, you can look through this with Anthony. Another way is to remember the example I gave of somebody being elected to an office. So I prefer that one. If so-and-so is elected to an office, then they will reduce taxes. The only way to specify if that statement is false is if indeed that person is elected to office and that taxes did not go down. So they didn't uphold their promise, so their entire statement was false. However, if that person is elected to office or is not elected to office, is not elected to office and taxes don't go down, we can't say anything about that person's claim as being false because they weren't elected to office. So we have to assume that they were telling the truth, and therefore the entire conditional statement is true. Now, if this person is not elected to office and taxes don't go down, again, or taxes do go down, unlike the last one, then it didn't matter because the person was not elected to office. So it doesn't matter what happens with the taxes, we're going to have to assume that they were telling the truth. And so the only way to say that a conditional statement is false is if the assumption or the assumption of the conditional statement, the proposition, that was the word, the proposition, the assumption is true, it happens to be true, but we don't follow through and the conclusion is false. So over here, we're looking for something that will make this true, and then if this is false, then it's false, but if it makes it true and it's true at the end, then the entire conditional statement is true, and that's the only way to make it false is if this is true and this is false. So we're looking at the assumption first. Is this statement true for x equals 2? So if we're going to put 2 here, if 2 is a prime number, is 2 a prime number? A prime number is only divisible by 1 in itself, so yes, 2 is only divisible by 1 in itself. It is a prime number. So this part is true. Now, we're going to check out the second part, the conclusion here. Then 2 is an odd number. Is 2 an odd number? No, in fact, it's the first even number. So that part's false. So when I break it down, the assumption is true, but the conclusion is false. That makes the entire conditional statement false. I'm going to bring up this. I like to see it in a truth table as a visual person. So we're going to say the assumption we will call P, and the conclusion we'll say is Q, and the conditional statement, if then, is going to be true or false. If the proposition is true, or the assumption, the proposition, the assumption, and the conclusion is also true, then the entire if-then conditional statement is true. If the proposition is false, but the conclusion is true, it doesn't matter, it is actually still true, because just like taking the pill or the person being elected to office, if this doesn't happen, we have to assume that it would have happened even though it didn't, and the person was telling the truth, or the pill would have worked, then the whole statement is true. The next one is if the conditional statement is true, but the conclusion is false. So she was elected to office, but taxes didn't go down, then she lied, and this is a false conditional statement. The next one is if it's not true, or false and then false, the assumption and the conclusion are false, this is actually still true, because just like the being elected to office, if she wasn't elected to office, then we still have to assume that she was telling the truth, because there's no way to prove that she's not telling the truth. So if it's false and false, we still say, well, it could have happened, so it's still true. So over here, which of one does that fall into? We had a true statement, but then the second part was false. True and then false made the whole conditional statement false. So we're going to go through and find these. The conditional statement is assumed false because 2 is an even number. The then is false regardless of the truth of the if. I think this can be kind of tricky. Regardless of the truth of the if, the false here only happens if the assumption is true. So it isn't regardless of the truth of the if. It's very important to know the truth of the if for the false, because it only happens once. So that one doesn't match. So we're going to go to the next one. The conditional statement is false because 2 is a prime number. It is. The if is true. Yeah, so far that's looking good. And 2 is an even number. Therefore, the then is false. That is true. So, the entire conditional statement is false because we proved that the assumption was true, but the conclusion was false, which makes the entire conditional statement false. In fact, that's the only way to get the conditional statement to be false. Okay, let's just go through the next ones just in case yours is different from mine. The conditional statement is neither true nor false. Well, it actually has to fall into one of those categories of being true and false because all conditional statements hold a truth value. And so the if-then statement has to have true or false. So let's move to the next one. There is not enough information to decide if the conditional statement is true or false. There's plenty of information here, and all conditional statements should be, again, given a truth value. They all have some truth value in a conditional statement. The next one, the conditional statement is assumed to be true because 2 is a prime number. 2 is a prime number. That was true. The if is true, but it doesn't say anything about the conclusion. And if you'll see this truth table over here, we have a truth and a truth. There's 2 options. So, and they have 2 answers here, and you can't decide between those by just looking at the truth of the assumption. We have to know the truth value of the conclusion so that I can know if the entire conditional statement is true or false. So in this case, this one is the only one that matches, and we can check here. If you don't have this, again, you can go back and close out, submit your review and go back in because you have unlimited attempts, and you can see if it has a green check mark or not. If you have any questions on this, feel free to email me, and good luck on your homework.